How much truth can one secret dinner hold? On March 21st, 1960, just hours before filming the legendary TV show, Elvis Presley met face-to-face with Frank Sinatra to broker a truce. The price of this pact was the fate of Las Vegas, and perhaps the life of the king of rock and roll himself. No press recorded this handshake, but today you will hear fragments of non-public reports found in archival vaults, which are key to understanding Elvis's Vegas empire. The key is in the contrasts. On one side was Elvis's insane financial power. From 1969 to 1976, Elvis Presley performed 636 sold-out shows at the International Hotel for a salary of $95,000 per week, encroaching on Sinatra's Rat Pack territory. On the other side was Frank Sinatra, who perfectly understood the dangerous rules of the game. At the height of his power, he himself was under close FBI surveillance. His dossier included 1,275 pages, due to alleged ties to mob bosses. His loss of a gambling license in 1963 only confirmed that he knew what he was warning Elvis about. But behind these astronomical figures and dazzling lights, a truth always hid. Vegas does not forgive competition, and the old bosses do not give up power without a fight. The price of this truce was significantly higher than any contract. It was measured in 636 exhausting shows, and according to our data, 10,000 doses of potent drugs prescribed to the king. To fully understand the mechanism of this fatal agreement, we will uncover three main elements that turned the king's triumph into tragedy. Fact 1. Territorial dispute and the secret account. 1960. Los Angeles, a hidden penthouse, not Las Vegas. Sinatra, whose influence in Vegas was absolute, saw this savage from Memphis as a direct threat. His public criticism of Elvis, music that stinks of rancid aphrodisiac, was not just a matter of taste but a coded signal. Sinatra and the Rat Pack virtually created the modern concept of Vegas residencies. They were not just artists. They were part of the casino's architecture, where profit from the tables was more important than show tickets. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, with his maniacal grip, planned to conquer Vegas. But unlike Sinatra, Parker did not have privileged access to the right families. The dinner was arranged as a prelude to the Welcome Home, Elvis's show, but its real script was written far beyond the studio. It was a private meeting disguised as a gentleman's agreement between two rival clans. Colonel Parker, a man without citizenship and with a questionable past, was the ideal mediator in this shadow world. He masterfully used the king's popularity to strike incredibly lucrative deals, which, however, subjugated Elvis to the casino's interests. The conflict of interest between management and the artist was obvious, but no one dared to speak of it aloud. These financial manipulations allowed the Vegas bosses to launder huge sums through the profits of his endless performances. It was this financial dependence that made Elvis vulnerable to any external demands. The International Hotel itself belonged to an influential millionaire whose assets were closely linked to political and union circles. By guaranteeing a sold-out audience every day, Parker ensured a continuous flow of hot cash into the hotel. Sinatra knew perfectly well about these schemes, as he himself was a participant in the game at the highest levels. His position was clear: either you play by the city's rules, or the city devours you. Whoever controlled the king controlled Vegas, or at least a significant part of it. Among the archival materials we discovered are scans of bank statements that were never meant to see the light of day. They indicate mysterious, small, but regular money transfers flowing from an offshore account linked to the International Hotel's assets to Colonel Parker's personal account between 1969 and 1974, disguised as consulting services for a total amount exceeding $300,000, over $2.2 million in modern equivalent. This was not part of Elvis's official contract. What were these shadow payments for? They were the payment for the guarantee of the king's presence on stage, an endless schedule of performances that ensured an uninterrupted flow of cash for the casino, linked to the city's foundation. Subscribe to the channel to be the first to see unpublished bank documents proving that Elvis's manager was part of Vegas's shadow scheme. Fact 2. Sinatra's monologue and limits of influence. The atmosphere was tense as a string. Elvis, always respectful but confident in his colossal popularity, listened. Sinatra, a veteran of the Sin City, clearly laid out the cards. He outlined the territorial division. Between us and your circus, Sinatra barely perceptibly mixes the word show with circus. There must be a border. You play the big venues, you bring in new audiences, fine. But the cash flow and the security of the city remain our business. We are the old connections. We are the foundation. This security was a euphemism for control over money and influence over unions and casino suppliers, a key element of mob control. The most shocking moment, which our sources whisper about, concerned a direct warning about connections. Sinatra, who himself painfully knew the cost of cooperation, whispered to Elvis about the danger. The colonel is trying to make deals behind the scenes. Tell him, don't meddle in business that's too big for him. These people don't listen to rock and roll, Elvis. They only hear the rustle of bills. And for that, they take their cut. Sinatra was not asking for a favor. He was demanding respect for a criminal order established over decades. He explained that profits from tickets were peanuts compared to the millions flowing through the gaming tables. The Rat Pack had an extensive network of political and union contacts that were inaccessible to Elvis. Sinatra even hinted that he could help the king avoid some potential troubles if he adhered to the rules. This was a clear recognition that Vegas belonged not to the owners, but to certain families. Sinatra's advice was not goodwill, but conditions for survival in their harsh business. Elvis, being an army boy, only partially understood how deeply he had immersed himself in the shadow world. The 1960 agreement was, in essence, permission for the king's existence in an empire belonging to the Voice and his friends. Although there is no direct evidence of Elvis's involvement with the mafia, archival data indicates that Colonel Parker was the gray figure who constantly balanced on this edge. It was Parker who, in 1969, struck that colossal deal with the International Hotel, demanding an unprecedented number of performances, twice a night, 7 days a week, which became an exhausting schedule that, experts believe, was the beginning of the end for the king's physical and mental health. This was the perfect eye for illegal operations. The show must go on. The public must be there. The money must circulate. He also subtly hinted that violating these unwritten rules could lead to unpredictable and very serious consequences. The truce was actually a form of control, guaranteeing that his brilliance would work for the benefit of existing shadow structures. It was vitally important for Sinatra to maintain the established order and prevent chaos from an uncontrolled new star. The warnings were not so much about protecting Elvis as about preserving the stability and financial integrity of their mafia empire in Vegas. Sinatra, as the senior player, was simply setting the limits of acceptable financial and territorial activity for the newly arrived king of rock and roll. Sinatra's monologue clearly made it understood by Elvis that no one in Vegas was free from the influence of powerful figures. This distribution of power guaranteed that both stars could exist without disrupting each other's financial flows. The colonel, in accepting these shadow terms, invisibly tied Elvis's fate to the harsh laws of the Vegas underworld. The king was to become the face of the era, but his managers sold him as a guarantee of stable income for the casino bosses. Sinatra clearly separated Elvis's creativity from the true economic interests that governed the city. Thus, the dinner became a formal transfer of a part of Vegas under Presley's control, but with significant limitations. Fact 3. The price of the great return. The truce was struck. Elvis gets Vegas, but on terms set by the old guard. This gave Elvis the green light for a triumphant return, documented by his 636 sold-out performances, but also doomed him. The hypnotic rhythm of performances, the forced schedule, the isolation in the huge 5,000-square-foot suite on the 30th floor of the International, all created a perfect vacuum for the development of his drug dependency. In 1973, Elvis collapsed on stage for the first time. His pills were the price of the contract, the exhausting shows that brought millions to the city's foundation. Sinatra, who himself battled dependencies, saw it before anyone else and warned, "This game will take you if you're not careful." And in this city, danger doesn't just come from the streets. The performance schedule was so grueling that it left the king no time for proper rest or recovery. Constant pain and exhaustion forced him to turn to potent drugs to maintain energy and sleep. The suite on the 30th floor of the International became his gilded cage, protected from the world but isolated from reality. His dependency on drugs became a critical and growing problem that could no longer remain a secret. Colonel Parker ignored all warnings because Elvis's performances were his personal financial guarantee. In 1974, Elvis began performing inadequately, causing deep concern among his entourage, but the show did not stop. It was this ruthless Vegas conveyor system that sucked not only the talent, but the very life out of Elvis. The king's tragedy was that his triumph in Vegas turned out to be his greatest mistake and a fatal downfall. His famous bejeweled jumpsuits, over time, became not an adornment, but armor concealing a rapid physical decline. The constant pressure to go on stage forced his doctors to write any necessary prescriptions without question. It was the greed of the colonel, who received a percentage of everything Elvis brought in, that fueled this deadly cycle of performances. Thus, Vegas became a place not of triumph, but of the long and slow public execution of the king of rock and roll before the eyes of millions of fans. The situation reached a critical point when even the most devoted fans noticed the king's physical exhaustion and noticeable sluggishness on stage. Huge doses of painkillers and sedatives completely destroyed his natural metabolism and mental stability. Elvis's physical changes, including swelling and unhealthy plumpness, were a direct consequence of the forced medicinal regimen. He turned into a hostage of his image, which demanded superhuman energy provided only by drugs. The International Hotel itself earned colossal profits from his residencies, thus turning a blind eye to any health problems of the main star. The king's entourage, known as the Memphis Mafia, essentially became his jailers, cutting him off from the outside world and real help. His desire to escape the Vegas trap constantly met with fierce resistance from Colonel Parker, who had complete financial control. Whenever the king tried to change the schedule or take a break, the colonel pointed out the penalties and multi-million-dollar losses for the hotel. Elvis, who always strived to please the audience and his team, could not break this financial and emotional ring. Thus, the golden period of Vegas became the most terrible and destructive phase of his life, lasting until his death. The secret dinner of 1960 was a pact that divided Las Vegas, where Sinatra handed Elvis the empire but warned of its deadly cost. The consequence was the king's health-ruining return to Vegas, which turned him into a hostage of the stage, and the secret money transfers discovered by us prove that his manager was part of the shadow mechanism. We have shed light on the silent agreement that explains Elvis's decline. But was his death in 1977 accidental? Who was behind the king being pumped with drugs? His doctor, Nicopolos, was accused in 14 criminal cases of malpractice, prescribing over 10,000 doses in 1 year. Subscribe so you don't miss the next, even more shocking episode, The Deadly Prescription. Who killed Elvis Presley, and what role did the colonel play in it? We will uncover facts that the authorities would prefer to keep buried. Don't miss it.